Okay, I think we can get started. GM everyone, and as a reminder, this meeting is for the DAO. So, at any point, feel free to unmute yourself and join the conversation or start one of yourself. Let's start maybe with a quick round of updates from the contributors, and we can start with Beansprout. Mr. Manifold couldn't be with us today. He's on a flight, so he sent me their updates, and I'm going to read it. So, key updates from Beansprout. The COOP Beansprout proposal, or the BSP, passed, and that has been funded. So now the next steps would be for the team to find the developers in order for them to implement the COOP or have it out. Second update is that roots are now live on Arbitrum. And then lastly, the root team is working on hopefully to have their betting or their own betting exchange contracts. Their own betting exchange contracts audited in the next few months. Okay, I think someone here is unmuted, or maybe that's them. All right, that's it from Beansprout. We can move to Beanstalk Farms. Guy, how are you doing?
Hey, Mod, doing well. GM, everyone. Keep my update this week somewhat brief, not for any lack of things to do, but mostly working on a lot of the same stuff I talked about last week, which is to say a lot of work happening on the Seraph BIP from a lot of different parties. Excited to see that come together over the next few days, and hopefully we'll have something to share with the community. If not tomorrow, then sometime next week. Also been exploring setting up code arena audits for upcoming BIPs. Hopefully we can get that set up for the first meaningful BIP that has meaningful amounts of new code sometime in January. For those who aren't familiar, a code arena is an audit competition. So the idea is they can start and finish an audit in, call it like 3 to 7 days, because they have anywhere from 50 to 100 white hats looking at the code at the same time, and those competitions have guaranteed payouts. So some open questions as to whether we can fund those with Beans, who's going to fund them, things like that, but spending some time working on that. There's a few other things in flight. I know Aliceras has been working on the Q1 budget BIP, things like that, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Guy. And yes, you did mention that there's the new budget BIP that's in works. So the DAO can expect it sometime soon, I'm assuming, or I guess. When do you think that BIP would go live for voting?
Not sure about when the BIP would go live, but I think we can reasonably share the draft early next week.
Okay. All right. And Breen, I see that you're with us. When we were giving the Beansprout updates, one of the things that we mentioned is that the COOP proposal passed, and now we're the next steps of continuing to build it or run it. Now that the funding is available, Breen, can you maybe give us a minute or two on what you're thinking on the next steps for the COOP? Okay, that's fine. You can share maybe the update like on a chat, and I can read it as well, Breen. Okay, let's move to development. Silo Chad, how's it going?
Good, Mod. A lot of stuff in flight. I'll keep my update pretty brief as well, since not too much has changed since last week. So finished the first version of some detailed NatSpec documentation for the silo module on the contracts, which you can see on the Beanstalk repo if you go take a look. We've shared this with Halborn and spent some time reviewing with them. As a reminder, the idea there is basically to level up our Solidity documentation such that auditors and white hats can really dig into the code more efficiently as they perform their work. So this is a sort of a security upgrade that we're considering implementing across the board. Also working with Breen on merging some of the related changes from that process into a couple of the active branches that are going on right now on the contract side. Notably, we've done this for Zero Withdraw, which is in progress, as well as some of the Sunrise updates, which Halborn audit is sort of in the final stages for those. Outside of this, so on the UI front, Coolbean and Beansama have continued to make progress on the market UI. The next milestone we're looking at, which is pending, is releasing the sort of new layout for the pod market, which has been designed by Sweet Red Beans at this time without the sort of advanced charting capabilities that we've been exploring. So this will be, sort of updating the structure and hopefully being clearer about, different things like where to find a list of my orders, and we're introducing a new order book component and all of those sorts of things. So the development work is we're deep in the process on that front. There's a couple more things to clean up that, but hopefully should be able to have that out in the next couple of days. So stay tuned. We've got some more conversations going on about that today. I think next up in the UI, we're looking at a number of upgrades, but there's been some design work done on upgrading the token selectors to basically make it easier to tell when you're using your farm and circulating balances. So I know there's been some confusion in Discord in the past about those things, and hopefully we can get a lot of that cleared up. In addition, we're working on a workflow for claiming and doing various actions on the site. So for example, if you have harvestable pods and you want to go deposit in the silo, you can do the harvest and the deposit in one transaction. So designs there are sort of in the later stages, and we'll begin development on that pretty soon. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Chad. Sweet Red Beans, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I will keep it brief given that Silo Chat actually covered, some of the work that we were doing because it sort of overlaps with what they're doing. But, on our end, mostly sort of this week focused on some of the pod marketplace V2 UX, rounding out some of the edges, more specifically working on the order book component and some of the zooming interactions to expect. And then with the advanced charting, also sort of developing what the zooming pattern will look like on the chart as a whole. So those are sort of the two things with regards to the chart that we're focused on this week. And then in addition, hoping to sort of deliver a final spec to the engineering team on this add this new UI selector to make it easier to sort of delineate between your farm and circulating balance, and also the claim and do X flow. And so, hopefully we can get that shipped in the next week or two, and something to look forward to there. But otherwise, I think that's it from on the design side of things.
Thank you, Sweet Red. Farmer Dan, how are things at your end?
Hey, Mod, doing well. GM farmers, hope everybody's doing well. Relatively short update out of marketing as well. New Beethoven song came out this week. There's going to be a new bi-weekly bean from eReal at the end of the week, as well as a new blog that's pretty good on bank runs that's being finalized as well from eReal. On my end, similar to the audio clip put out last week, I'm working on something as well that's kind of highlighting, the benefits of positive carry and businesses that are looking to build on top of Beanstalk. There was a really good discussion from a podcast that I want to highlight. We started doing merch giveaways for class and stuff like that, so be sure to, make sure you're attending AMAs. Working on an explainer thread as well, similar to some things in the past. Another thing that I wanted to highlight, I feel like a big part of my role is, highlighting these high quality discussions and ideas that are happening around the farm, kind of simplifying things for those who might be newer to the project, and sort of just, highlighting these things that are happening around the farm. But, another big part of marketing is also, expanding reach, reaching new people and things like that. So that's something that I definitely want to get more into. So if anybody has any ideas for marketing, PR, reach expansion, or like any new podcasts that it might be beneficial for Bean to be featured on. Definitely looking for ideas. So please feel free to reach out to me as well. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have going on right now.
Thank you, Farman. And I would highlight that with any help, let's say, or any reach in that sense, farmers or folks can make use of the community grant. And Sync is one or was one who made use of that. So I would encourage all others to do the same. Okay, I think we are at the end of the Beanstalk Farms updates. I'll give it a minute. Sync, did you want to maybe talk about the bot that's currently live?
Hey, Mod. Yeah, do you hear me all right?
I hear you.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Yeah, the BOP2 is up. Just over 2 days left for voting. We're at about 16.5 million stock voting for it so far. We're 62% of the way towards quorum. So we need about 10 million more stock before Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the proposal and give it some consideration, would be very grateful for that. And just want to thank everybody that has, raised visibility about it via Twitter and other channels. And just to follow up on Farmer Dan's comments, the Hats Finance team, if this proposal does pass, they actually reached out to me. They'd be happy to do a Twitter Spaces with Beanstalk. And so, next week before the holidays, something kind of celebratory, assuming the proposal moves forward. So just an opportunity to kind of chat about the proposal and, just raise visibility about Beanstalk on Twitter and social media channels. So we'll revisit that after Saturday. We'll see what the outcome is. But, other than that, just thank you everybody again for this. Decentralized governance is a very interesting beast that we are all learning to navigate, and this was a good learning experience. Thank you,
Sync. And Sync, do you want to maybe in a minute just summarize what is the BOP that's currently live? So maybe those who are with us and they don't, they haven't read it or they don't know what the proposal is about.
Sure. Yeah. The TLDR essentially on this is, it's been over half a year since the exploit, and long story short, the original motivation behind this proposal was from a few months ago when Mango Markets was able to achieve a resolution to their exploit, which was over $100 million exploit, and the exploiter returned about 40% of it back, or rather 60% of it back to their DAO, and kept 40% for himself and his team. So that was the the origin of this, and so I essentially just wanted to give this a shot, and so that's what me and Hats Finance did. We grouped together, and essentially this proposal is suggesting that Beanstalk raised the bounty offer to the exploiter to 40%, and Beanstalk's DAO would retain 60% minus a small fee, or rather a small reward to the various parties that helped move this proposal forward, and to Beanstalk Farms, assuming a recovery is achieved. So nobody would receive anything unless a recovery is achieved. There's no beans being minted with this proposal. Nobody's going to take anything up front for this. This is purely an endeavor that if a recovery is achieved, that's our hope, and that's the goal here. So it's a shot in the dark, but we felt it's worth it. So again, thank you everybody for considering it.
Thank you, Sync. The BOP is live on Snapshot. It's also linked on the Beanstalk UI, and as Sync said earlier, there are 2 days left for this vote. Okay, I'll stop here maybe for a minute, just see if other folks have something that they wanna, they can think of they wanna discuss. Otherwise, we can close it maybe with a few thoughts from Publius. Okay, Ya asks, what's your goal to attract new capital, and how are you doing it? And this is sent to, or maybe the question is to the marketing team. I think maybe the marketing team can answer or give an opinion on that, but maybe this question can also be directed to everyone. So this is a question that is in general to I can give maybe a thought or an idea on that. Generally speaking, I don't think the approach that we want to take is is to shill in the sense that, hey, come buy our product. The approach that we want to take is explain what it is that we're doing, and what is this thing that we're building, and what is it that's solving, and then it's up to everyone to to participate and make their decision in that. So I understand, of course, that the songs may not help in explaining what even though it may do that to an extent. But that is not the purpose, let's say, of the songs. This is one thing that is done, or a side thing, and it's a small part of what marketing does. The main focus when we're thinking of what material and things to bring out is, again, to explain what is Beanstalk, why are we building Beanstalk, and how does Beanstalk work. It's none of such as that you're gonna get these amazing APIs, or we trust just trust us, do this, or come and buy this thing, and maybe it will do this or not. That is from the marketing end, but let's have this as an open conversation and hear others what others think as well. And Farmer Dan, feel free as well to to maybe chime in or add or say what you're thinking as well.
Yeah. Totally agree with you as far as like our goal isn't to try and like shield the project or get people to buy or LP or anything like that. But yeah, just to be able to highlight the things that are going on. And I think like sometimes like the point's kind of missed, in the sense that I think we need to do a good job of highlighting all the things that are happening in the direction that we're moving in. In the sense that Beanstalk is working towards becoming a place where businesses can build on top of it. And that's something that, the fit and the use cases from being able to build a business that has this positive carry is something that will ultimately lead to more use and things like that. And it's just kind of about highlighting those things. And as far as the songs and stuff go, I almost wouldn't even consider that to be a part of marketing at all. It's basically a show of community, and like the fact that we have a strong community and people that want to be engaged with the project, and even if they don't have this level of expertise in development or in understanding the financial principles, they still believe in the project, want to be engaged with it, and are doing their part to contribute, sort of. So in my opinion, it's a show of community. And obviously, as you look across the space here, projects that have a strong community, that's definitely an important aspect to have.
Thank you, Farmer Dan. And yeah, continues. Maybe I'm gonna read their comments. So they're saying that we're not asking about shilling the product, but there is zero interest right now, and with no new capital, this cannot move forward. Now I'm sharing my personal opinion, so I don't speak on behalf of other let's say contributors or other farmers. I think I disagree. As long as Bean is there and it continues for long periods, this is what matters. If we don't have, let's say, a certain interest or activity in a specific period of time, that does not, mean, anything in the overall picture in general. I think that we are in a good position, or we're in a good spot, given everything else, of course. Not too worried about that there are certain activities, and I don't think that we may want to change our direction or change or let's say like panic, just given how things are. This is not the first time, let's say, as well, that Beanstalk as a protocol goes through a period like this, and it's not even the second time. So I think once again, and this is me speaking, is that I think we are in a good spot.
Would ask a question. Some of y'all's comments are about the narrative. In a bear market, people will come, and that hasn't happened. Now, what's the narrative? And sorry for the noise where I am at the moment, but don't. To some extent, I think the concept that there needs to be a narrative, or that their previous narrative hasn't worked. This is way off base. narratives are by definition not the substance. And Beanstalk is not at a point, to your earlier point, Farmer Dan, where businesses can build on top of Beanstalk. And so in short, right now, and I mean, I also think it's a little disingenuous. Beanstalk was exploited 8 months ago, and therefore all of the positive feedback loop economics that were in place at the time went back to zero. And in fact, there's a negative feedback loop associated with all the previous debt. So the concept that the system's just going to be up and running at full speed immediately, and therefore some of the economic theses around why people will ultimately want beans during bull markets and bear markets, it's a little bit of a disingenuous criticism. And furthermore, I think if we're trying to zone in on what the narrative actually was, or at least what we understood one of the main benefits of holding beans during a bear market is not necessarily that there's competitive yields in beans per se, although this is, you also have to factor in the macroeconomic conditions and the fact that the treasury yields are way up. So now there's also a question of the risk, Beanstalk's competing with the risk-free yield, and Beanstalk is a way higher risk asset, or beans are a way higher risk asset than treasuries. But beyond that point that the macroeconomic conditions have changed significantly, at the micro level, the real incentive that exists during a bear market, whether it's a Beanstalk bear market or a larger bear market, is not the bean seigniorage. And there's no rush ever from Beanstalk's perspective to get to a point where there are more beans minted. In fact, that's the main way that Beanstalk debt is structured. There's never a due date. Instead, there are conditions under which the debt is paid back. That's one of the fundamental things about Beanstalk that make it different from other economic systems. The core's incentive around bean exposure during a bear market is stock, really. That there's some accrual of stock, and the grown stock system, or the stock system, creates incentives when there is net outflows from Beanstalk, whether it's a bank run or just a bear market, for people to retain or even acquire bean exposure. So to some extent, maybe there's misunderstanding or there's miscommunication, or maybe both, as to what is a reasonable way to expect Beanstalk to perform in any given market conditions. But the narrative that Ya seems to be proposing, that things are going in the wrong direction and this is unsustainable, I think factually is incorrect. And in particular, if you look at the history of Beanstalk, there have been other periods of time where the beans minted to pay for things by the DAO have been much larger, and the deficit in the bean price from its peg has been larger, both in terms of price and delta B. So just feel like in general, it's either a disingenuous take or at best it's a miseducated take. And it's even just the premise that the narratives are the thing to be optimizing around is wrong. The substance isn't there yet. Beanstalk isn't there yet. And it is very much a catch-22. But the idea that the people that are paid by the DAO to build things and to work on things substantively, that they're in charge of the narratives. And again, I think with the potential exception of the marketing team, which is more of a reasonable question to ask. And prior to your question, even both Mod and Farmer Dan had been discussing that already. So again, that's why I think there's a question as to how genuine is the question here, and not to call your genuity into question, yeah, but instead would challenge you to just, if you have real questions, to ask the actual question as opposed to dancing around the issues here. So there are real issues to discuss, but the idea that the narrative is the issue, I don't think that's it. And understand you said you're on a plane. Feel like these conversations are much better had voice to voice, but to some extent, we all need to do a better job of engaging with what are the really substantive issues, and comments that are not explicit really contract or detract from the conversation as opposed to add to it.
Thank you, Publius. And yeah, so yeah, one of maybe the things that they said is 8 months is 6 years in crypto, and we as we, you know, like we may all agree, the time, let's say, in crypto moves a lot faster. A lot has happened in the past 8 months. Not only do you have a protocol that revived and is back on, it is almost completely, it's the same protocol, but it's a new protocol, UI, code wise, etc. They also asked, what is being built on top of Beanstalk. So Root is built and continues to build on top of Beanstalk. The coup, which Breen is working on, is something as such as well. What projects are reaching out? So Paradox is one of the protocols or projects that came and utilized or used Beans. These things may seem small at the current, right now. The activity on it or the volume on it may look or seem small, but these are big steps. It is, let's say, like a new era or a new direction or a new, now we have things or ways that beans are used that weren't used before. And we expect these things, we work towards these things, them as well, themselves to grow, and then to have also more of them, if that makes sense. Lastly, when it comes to marketing, one thing that we can all work on is to increase exposure. So we may not want to, we may not think on how can we convince someone, as we said, this approach that we don't want, which is to convince someone to, to participate. But what can we do to increase the exposure so more people are aware of what Beanstalk is? And the songs is one of these things. So when when you do these things and you do the communities and sort of things, that's meant to keep up the engagement, keep people high on it, and they talk on these things or they share these things, and that's expected to increase exposure. Some of these ideas or thoughts may come from community members, may come from others. So let's say it's an open invitation to everyone. If you can think of something that you can think is interesting, then let's do it. Maybe we can throw, the poker tournament was meant to, or is one of these things. Maybe we can throw something or do something that, hey, a lot of people would be interested in, and then that also increases, a Beanstalk exposure.
I feel compelled to comment on the 8 months is 6 years in crypto time. On the one hand, it's totally true because things are moving fast. This is a new space and things are changing in real time and constantly. But on the other hand, things are actually not moving that fast. And while the world is exploding around us in many ways, the reality is that the tech on Ethereum hasn't gotten that much better over the past 5 years. So in short, the idea that the only thing Beanstalk needs is a good narrative, and it'll be ready for whatever you want to think the future of Beanstalk is. That's wrong. And as we understand things, DeFi is not ready for Beanstalk. So even if we assume that the gauge system is implemented and Beanstalk is getting really refined, we don't think that the AMMs, the borrowing and lending protocols, really anything that currently exists in the EVM is ready for real economic activity. And so to some extent, the idea that it even is good for Beanstalk to have a bunch of narratives where now there's a lot of dollars, significant dollars flowing into the ecosystem at the moment, that would be good for Beanstalk. Unclear, given that by definition, if there's no real economic activity happening in the ecosystem, it's all speculative demand. And to some extent, there's nothing wrong with speculative demand. Someone recently brought up that inorganic demand has perhaps been confused with speculative demand, and would agree with that idea. So maybe to bifurcate in this case, there's nothing wrong with demand for beans, that the nature of the demand is speculation on the future demand for beans per se. But when it comes to the overall health of the Beanstalk ecosystem or Beanstalk itself, the ratio of demand for beans that is utility based versus speculative, that's probably in the long run going to be very important. And while there's nothing to say that Beanstalk can't first grow from speculative demand and then shift to more utility-based demand, from our perspective, any narrative-based demand is by definition speculative. And we're talking about right now the delta B is 400 and something thousand beans, which is not insignificant. The price is at 96 cents and change. So it's not like beans are at their peg. But by the same token, it's not like the system is currently collapsing. In fact, there's an argument to be made that any other algo stable model that has previously been tested in the wild has not really spent any time at 98 cents, 97 cents, 96 cents, the way that Beanstalk has. And these periods of time are proofs of the economic model in and of themselves. A perfect peg is not always the thing that Beanstalk tries to create. Instead, it's a low volatility asset that over time oscillates above and below its peg. So as the economic peg maintenance as the peg maintenance model is refined further, feel like the magnitude and duration of the oscillations can be further tweaked. But in the grand scheme of things, it's really important that the real demand for beans comes from demand to use the beans. And it was really cool to see the Paradox pools launch and to see people buying beans to mint roots or just buying roots to bet with. And that was perhaps the first real utility of beans at all. And that's very exciting, very exciting. But again, that's not the tech itself isn't there yet where the betting experience can really rival Vegas. And it's not so far away. It's not. We on this end at least feel like that goal is really in sight, and it's a question of months, not years at this point. And to be frank, I feel like most of the progress towards that goal is going to come out of the Beanstalk ecosystem, and it's very exciting to see. But the perspective that there's a narrative issue and that narratives are the things that drive liquidity, which is true. We as a collective, at least in our opinion, and Publius's opinion, we should be pushing back against that. Beanstalk is not something that is supposed to come and go with the tide and with the narrative. In fact, Beanstalk is hopefully counter-cyclical and anti-reflexive. And I guess that was the original point about the narrative about thriving in a bear market, that in theory, something like this should be to some extent counter-cyclical. Again, that has to be weighed in the context of the macro environment as well as the crypto environment and the Beanstalk micro situation, which is heavily impacted by the exploit. But the point is, this is not, at least from where we see things, this is not a time to be really trying to push new narratives around Beanstalk. The narratives, which again, there's nothing wrong with narratives per se, but I think there is something wrong with Beanstalk farms or people that are paid by the DAO being responsible for the narratives. I think those are two different things. The narratives will write themselves when the tech is ready, and the tech is getting there. There's a ton of development happening at this point on and around Beanstalk, but it's not all ready yet, and therefore any narratives, whether they're organic or inorganic narratives, they're not going to be able to create utility-based demand for beans, and therefore unclear what the real value is at this point, other than maybe a slightly tighter peg and push back against the need for a super tight peg at this point as well.
I'd like to share some thoughts. I mean, I think it's it's kind of good to just go back, at least for me, like the really compelling points about Bean to begin with were this realization that, well, there is a dollar shortage in the world. People around the world, entrepreneurs around the world, I've been one in Pakistan, they have a hard time accessing dollars. In fact, there was this really interesting tweet from Amin Soleimani yesterday that USDT on Tron is the most used stablecoin in Iran, and it made him sort of question a lot of things he's doing. The reason I bring this up is that, like, I think one historical parallel that's like very relevant for everything that Bean is doing is the rise of the euro dollar market, which is this offshore dollar market that's largely which is basically US dollars held by non-US dollar banks, and against those dollars, there's this very large credit system that is now in the tens of trillions, which is basically currently used by the rest of the world as a funding and financing mechanism. And this this on-chain dollar that is credit based, that's the system that it can potentially compete with. So just wanted to chime in and say that, like, the original sort of, or at least the I wouldn't call it narrative, but the problem statement I remember about this project is that there's a shortage of dollars on chain. We want to find an elegant solution to bring a lot of dollars on chain, and at least from my perspective, I think that solution continues to improve. And that's the part I'd like to see continuous work being done on, which I think is being done on. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Asfi. Quasimat asks,
and to your point, Asfi, there's no demand for dollars on chain right now. Why? Because all the demand for dollars on chain was speculative demand, which comes and goes with the tide. So hopefully, whenever there's a lot of demand for beans, it will be for real economic activity, which is not nearly as cyclical as the comings and goings of the crypto spot market.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think, I mean, there's another perspective too, right? Like on Bean and the need for a decentralized stablecoin. See, like, and this is like, I think, getting to this is a more messier issue, which is that, like, nation states like Pakistan are very unlikely to agree to a free flow of capital, even though that's pretty good for people in places like those countries. But there's always sort of going to be a challenge, and so it's unlikely. At least my bet is, which is why I continue to remain very closely involved with this project. It's unlikely that a centralized custodian will, like, satisfy the world's thirst for dollars. And so it's I guess I've not been very coherent in my view, but it's like the thirst for dollars has not gone away in the world. If anything, it's gotten worse, or like if anything, it's grown. This new on-chain weird world, it's pretty niche. Not a lot of people know about it or how to get on it. But like, yeah, it's the goal that, like, this project is striving towards. It's a big one, and it's an audacious one. And I think, like, the better that this project gets at it, like, just floating in and around peg. I mean, I think it's a matter of time before more people start realizing it. But anyway, it's so good to hear all of you guys speaking and discussing.
In order for any of that demand for euro dollars to translate to demand for beans, except for the speculative demand for euro dollars that we already see on chain during bull markets, there is going to need to be an ability for businesses building on chain, on a DeFi tech stack, to compete with, in terms of the UX, their experience and the UXs that they can provide for customers, to compete with current centralized tech stack. And the whole of DeFi just isn't there yet, unfortunately. So then the question becomes, is it better to prioritize speculative demand or just wait until, assuming that the development is happening, which at least from our perspective, it's happening. Then the question is there a value in prioritizing speculative demand in advance of the system really being ready? And at least on this end, vote strongly no.
I would strongly no as well.
I'll give it a few seconds, maybe see if others have thoughts on this topic before we move to the next one. And Seema, maybe while we're at it, I see you've shared a few things about what you guys are working on or what the irrigation team is working on. Feel free to, if you want to maybe share a little bit. I see that you've already shared some. If you want to share some with the DAO, feel free to do so. And that's in the Barnyard chat if Seema doesn't want to, or isn't next to the mic. The details that what they shared is in the Barnyard chat. Okay, question from Quasimat. Speaking of development being done, is there any more info on Wells? The problem it solves, how it works?
So the problem that Wells is trying to solve is that currently when you're providing liquidity to an AMM, it is almost by definition, or perhaps by definition, a money-losing proposition. Because once your order is out there, because any sort of AMM is effectively a fixed order curve, once the order is on chain, the only way for you to update the order is to submit another transaction on chain. And the problem is that there's effectively a competition to get orders updated first before the orders can be traded again. And this race condition is an MEV problem whereby the miners get to decide the ordering of the transactions and get to decide whether the liquidity provider gets to update their order and save the money, or whether some trader gets to trade against it and collect some arbitrage. And in both cases, the value is in practice lost by the liquidity provider because the miner actually gets to extract the value. So what this means is that providing liquidity locks in that your order is going to receive the worst quality trading flow against it under current AMM. And it doesn't really matter whether you're providing on Curve or Uniswap V2 or V3. Potentially V3 offers some minor upgrades to this because you can define the interval over which you're buying and selling very closely, such that it really is just a limit order that you assume you can't really update if certain conditions change. And so I guess it's slightly better, but the concept is when you compare that with a centralized exchange trading experience, there's no cost whatsoever to updating orders. And furthermore, you expect that the ordering of the updating of the orders is honored by the exchange, meaning that, and perhaps this isn't actually the way that it works in a lot of cases, unfortunately, but there's some aspect of you expect the exchange that you're using to honor your transactions, or if you're canceling a transaction or updating an order, to honor that. Whereas on chain, there is no priority in ordering, and you actually have to pay for the cancellation or the priority of the cancellation, which results in you losing all of the value that you could save from updating the order. So again, currently, the structure of AMMs means that you're buying and selling at times you don't want to be buying and selling because the market has moved against you. It's very unlikely, given the structure of AMMs, where they're not particularly deep in most cases, it's unlikely that there's going to be competitive depth per se when you combine this with the fact that providing liquidity is non-competitive. So it creates a bad experience for providing liquidity, which then in turn creates a bad experience for trading, and no one's actually happy. So you combine that with the fact that why is currently providing liquidity incentivized with a hefty trading fee, which actually creates lots of inefficiencies in the market. So all around, this is not really a healthy or sustainable system. Now, in short, I mean, maybe to expand the problem statement a little bit further, it's not just that the orders themselves need to be updated constantly. It's that the orders are really limited in their definition. So if you're providing liquidity on Curve or Uniswap V2 or V3, the curves over which you're providing liquidity are highly limited. And so in practice, while Uniswap V3 does allow you to create some sort of custom curve over which you're providing liquidity, it's not generally, the concept is that at the aggregate level, you're not offering the same user experience because you're locking people into one specific curve. So every current AMM defines an explicit curve, and everyone is locked into trading on that curve or providing liquidity on that curve. And if you expand this problem not just to DEXs where things trade, but AMMs in general where lending and borrowing happens, for example, this creates a really poor experience for borrowing and lending because the interest rates over which you have to borrow and lend are explicitly defined by the lending pools themselves or the protocols themselves and not the lenders. So both in terms of trading and borrowing and lending, there's very little customizability or optionality that currently exists in the ability to create orders. And then you have to actually constantly update your positions if they can be updated at all, like in Uniswap V3, in order to maintain the positioning that you actually want in the order book. But you can't actually perform the updates in an economic fashion because you have this problem around the execution on chain. And so, in short, if you consider, I mean, maybe the last problem that is being solved here is that all of these, or the last major problem that Wells are trying to solve, is that the liquidity in the AMMs that currently exist are not easily usable or queryable by other protocols. And so, just as a simple example, one thing that Beanstalk has faced many times is that understanding or querying the delta B, the time-weighted average delta B in the Bean 3 curve pool or the Bean ETH pool is not actually so trivial because of the way that the AMMs are architected. So even in terms of just composability and other protocols using these pools on chain, the pools are not architected in a way where even the deployers of the pool, right? These are Beanstalk community deployed or Beanstalk deployed or Publius deployed pools. In every instance, still the pools cannot be implemented in such a way where it's easy to interact with Beanstalk per se. So you've got all of these different problems, which again go back to this is maybe one of the core issues that make it such that trading on DeFi really doesn't rival centralized finance experiences. The goal of Wells is to create an order to trade certain assets that is effectively arbitrary in nature. And what that can mean, even though originally the order types that are implemented will probably be pretty basic, the idea is if the architecture is sufficiently composable, every time a new order type or new strategy is added on chain, people can copy and mirror and add into or compose strategies together to create really sophisticated orders over time, the basic idea is that you can, for example, put in beans into a well and give a price or a pricing curve over which to buy ETH using those beans. And you can also give a pricing curve over which to buy USDC using those beans. And you can also give a pricing curve over which to buy USDT or Roots or any other token effectively or asset on chain using those beans. And assuming that someone actually trades against the well, where now the well has USDC in it instead of beans, the well can be predefined such that now the well can sell USDC into any of those other assets, again, according to certain predefined curves. Now, the other layer of abstraction here that's really important is that these curves or these orders can take in some series of inputs or parameters that can be, again, arbitrary. So it can be any on-chain data or some oracle that's submitting off-chain data, that the order is in practice updating itself in real time, but doesn't actually require a transaction to upgrade or update, because the order is itself a function of certain data, and the data being updated is what changes the order. And so in practice, this allows effectively for trading strategies or a whole strategy, a sophisticated liquidity providing strategy to be encoded in a single well, and for that to ultimately be used somewhat arbitrarily. Now, additionally to that, every well that is deployed can be deployed with an arbitrary set of pumps, which encode or in fact, store on chain, according to the specifications of the pumps, the data that the pumps save on chain in order for whatever needs to be used by other protocols on chain, such that you can effectively, when you deploy the liquidity pool, deploy it with, when you deploy the well, you can deploy it with the appropriate pumps such that the well's liquidity can interoperate with the protocols that, need certain pump functionality. So what well should do, and it's unclear when the full functionality for wells will be available. But again, it's in sight. It's not years away. It's months away. The idea is that when people provide liquidity into wells, it is no longer a money-losing proposition for the liquidity provider, and the liquidity that is being provided can actually be completely composed or reused on chain, such that you now have interoperability with the liquidity itself. So sorry for the long explanation, but that's in theory how it should work.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Agent Bean asks, what is the current bottleneck for developing wells, Publius?
At this point, there are no known bottlenecks. It's more a question of just things take time. Particularly if we're trying to do them the right way, where the work is done once and then can just be used going forward, things take a little bit more time.
Okay. We're all almost top of the hour. Let's with a few minutes left. Let's see if others have anything that they wanna maybe discuss, and we can go over the hour if needed. Agent Bean follows up and asks, does that mean that we figured out the Oracle issue for wells?
Well, figured out is probably not the right way to say it, whereas the architecture is figured out to a point where each different like pump implementation can be done totally separately or modularly. So there is some work that still needs to get done, or research to be done on the perfect parameters for the pumps for the Bean ETH pool, let's call it. But it's at this point.
Okay, I see Quasimat is typing. So Quasimat maybe asks or wants to clarify, and they say that this is a simplification, but is it fair to say that wells allow LPers to define a complex and dynamic set of orders for their liquidity?
Yeah, it's not wrong. Like n-dimensional polynomial dynamic curve or something.
It's the pod marketplace V2 on steroids.
You could say something like that.
Okay, I think we are at the end maybe of the questions. Thank you all for joining us in today's meeting, and we'll see you next week. Have a good day.